All right, it's good to see everybody tonight. We're glad that you're here for Bible study with us, and I've got my Pancake Day shirt on I want to say thanks to everybody that bought tickets for Pancake Day with Rotary Club. It was last Saturday, and all the money they raise goes towards local high school students' scholarships for college, and also for eliminating polio around the world. And that was we set that up in 1985 to eliminate polio, and it's down to 2 countries. And the only reason it's not completely done is because those 2 countries are afraid, both Afghanistan and Pakistan, that the West is trying to take them over, and they're doing it by giving them shots. And so that is one of the reasons polio still exists in those places. Let me start with a word of prayer. Dear Lord, thank you so much for today, and we invite you to lead this Bible study, and that you would open our hearts and minds so that we understand it. Help us to be able to dive into the Bible tonight and to be able to really understand it and let it be a motivator for us, and help us to examine our own lives and to be able to see the areas where we need to improve. And we just thank you for that in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so we are going to be looking in the book of Judges tonight, and we are building off of what I preached on Sunday, what I've been talking about, what I talked about last week about things that we need to say no to be able to say yes to other things. And, we use the example of college, and but you could use anything. You could use getting in shape, you could use fixing your marriage, whatever it is, but you have to say no to some things to be able to say yes to the things that God wants you to do. And if we're talking tonight, we were examining on Sunday the idea that we need to be willing to stand up against evil, is one of the premises that I made. And we were talking about Joshua leading the Israelites into the promised land, and that what stood in the way of that happening is they had to go through Jericho. And so, that's the highest walled city in that area at the time, a fortress. And so they had to be willing to step out in faith to do those things. And so that is where we stand tonight is, there is evil all around us, and situations that go on. And I know people who have, their families are so messed up, and they have it every time they get together, it's just a fist fight kind of deal. But they are unwilling to stand up and make changes, to take a stand and say, this has to stop. This is not going to keep happening year after year, time after time. We're going to make some changes that need to happen. And so we're going to talk about just Gideon, but we're going to speak more about Abimelech. We're going to look at the end of Gideon's life. And Gideon was in chapter 6 of Judges, but tonight we are going to be in chapter 8. And this is after Gideon and his 300 men defeat the Midianites. And the Midianites were described as being like sand on the seashore. They had oppressed the Israelites for years. And remember, the reason for the oppression when it comes that God allowed other people to come in and oppress them, take them over, and all of that was because the Israelites, when times were good, would forget about God, and they would turn to other gods and start worshiping the same ones of the people around them. And so that's where we start tonight. And so let's just make sure that we understand from the beginning. So maybe we should keep our finger there in Judges, and then we should turn in our Bibles to Galatians in the New Testament, 6:7. So Galatians, remember we talked about, if you're trying to figure out right after 1st and 2nd Corinthians, you'll find Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians. The mnemonic device would be General Electric Power Company, if you're going to put those in order. So look with me at Galatians 6, verse 7. This is Paul writing to a group of churches in Galatia. So it's like saying I'm sending it to the churches of Middle Tennessee. And so this particular passage is one you're familiar with, but it starts off, Galatians 6, verse 7. Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. And so that is a promise that we should understand. And so when somebody wrongs us, we should know that, God is going to pay them back for what they've done to us. And the same for us, if we wrong somebody else, that there is a consequence that comes with it. And, we see that all the time in the things that go on. And so God is a God of justice. And so for us to sit there, we go, okay, I want it to happen. And this is the part that we have a problem with. We don't have a problem with God's justice. Sometimes we look at it like Habakkuk looks at it in the Old Testament. There's a whole book by the prophet Habakkuk. And he says, how long are you going to let evil people flourish? Talking to God, right? And so we have a problem with the timing of God's justice. We want it to happen. If they hurt us, we want something to happen to them on the way home, right? We want it to happen right away. And so God's timing is not our timing. Peter is very clear to tell us, a day for God's like 1,000 years for us. He's just making the metaphor, right? It's a simile. It's like that. And so, but God's timing is one of the issues. And then we also take issue with how, his methods, right? We want it to happen, have a shark come up and bite them and tear them into a bunch of pieces. We want a bus to hit them. We want an anvil to fall from the sky on their head. We want terrible, awful things to happen immediately to somebody who has wronged us. And God has all the information. He is Alpha and Omega. And so the how is always for a reason. He does it the way he does it. It's always to make a point of some sort. All right. So we're here and we're looking at in chapter 8 of Judges. So we're jumping back to the Old Testament and we're trying to see what happens after everything is said and done. And Gideon has, the Lord has given them victory and all of the stuff that's gone on. But it says in verse 22 so we're going to be in 8:22. This is important because this is after the victory, after everything's said and done. All the leaders have been killed from the enemy. And so the people come to Gideon and they say this right here. They have this conversation in verse 22. The Israelites said to Gideon, rule over us, you, your son, and your grandson, because you have saved us from the hand of Midian. Great. That's a great thing. If you're the leader and the victor, to have somebody say that to you, that would be a great honor, a privilege, and power, prestige, fame. All those things are attractive things to human beings. And so, but his response in verse 23 is huge. It just says, but Gideon told them, I will not rule over you, nor will my son rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. And so that for us puts things in perspective in terms of Gideon's reign, in terms of his, what God did through him as he made sure it is a consummate story of somebody who didn't think a lot of themselves, had low self-esteem, said he was from the smallest clan in Manasseh, which is one of the 12 tribes. And he said, I'm the least in my father's, household kind of deal. He does not feel himself worthy. And then yet God allows him with just 300 men to do great and mighty things. And it is fulfilling a New Testament principle. And that New Testament principle is God does the greatest things through the weak. He does, he doesn't use the wise is what it says, is that he'll use the simple folks to do great things, because then he gets all the credit, as opposed to, that's the idea of Gideon saying, well, I have this many men. And, God said, no, that's too many, because if you go into battle with that many, you'll think you did it, that you guys are responsible for the victory rather than me. So that's why he narrows it down to 300 and does that. And you can see that this is kind of we talked about what a day should look like, because this is the only 24 hours that we've been promised. And so the day should start off with prayer for the day. And at the end of the day, we should give God the thanksgiving and recognize all the ways he's worked during that day, whether he protected us or provided for us or blessed us in some way. And so here he is, and this is at the end of the story for him, for the most part, after the battle is over, kind of like Joshua leading the children into the promised land, Jericho. They march around it, the walls fall down, and there should be a huge prayer of thanksgiving at the end of that. Much like Hannah, who couldn't have children in 1 Samuel 1, she prays for a child, God blesses her, and she has a child, and then there's this song, right? There is this Hannah's song, the same as Mary's song when she has Jesus, or Elizabeth, these huge prayers of thanksgiving at the end. And that's what you're seeing here in chapter 8, is this idea. And so, but if we keep moving along and we keep reading in verse 24, he says, I do have one request, that each of you give me an earring from your share of the plunder. And then at that point, when you hear those words, if you're a Bible scholar, if you're just somebody who studies studies God's word, you're like, oh no, golden calf. I'm hearing golden calf here. Give me an earring, right? Because the children said that, and Aaron was the one. Aaron the priest said, give me an earring. Everybody give me something gold, and we'll make a god. But this is, you're like, he's not going to make a golden calf, surely, after the comments he just made. And it says, it was the custom of the Ishmaelites to wear gold earrings. They answered, we'll be glad to give them. So they spread out a garment, and each of them threw a ring from his plunder into it. The weight of the gold rings he asked for came to 1,700 shekels, not counting the ornaments, the pendants of the purple garments worn by the kings of Midian, or the chains that were on their camels' necks. 43 pounds of gold. That's what 1,700 shekels, 43 pounds. So to them, that's a lot of gold. To us, 16 ounces, right? It's about, I don't even know what it's selling for now, between $2,000 and $3,000 an ounce, probably. And so 16 ounces in a pound, he's got 43 pounds of it. And we talked about that in Solomon's time, that they would bring him on average 25 tons of gold a year to hear his wisdom, and just tribute. And so here he is, that's a lot of gold. And it says that, the next line is that Gideon, I'm in verse 27, Gideon made the gold into an ephod, which he placed in Ophrah, his hometown. All Israel prostituted themselves by worshiping it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and his family. So it sounds like a good thing that's happening. He is actually making, a remembrance. We talked about memorials on Sunday, right? That God said, take 12 stones, set them up. And this is going to remind you of when the Jordan parted, and everybody, Joshua leading, Joshua's your leader. He's going to lead you across. It's the priests that lead the way with the Ark of the Covenant, but he's leading you into the promised land. I'm leading you into the promised land, is what God was saying. The fear of me, fear of you has gone in ahead, and I've done that. And so they made a memorial to remember that. And so that's a great thing, because you can teach your kids by looking at that memorial, hey, remember when this happened. And so I'm assuming maybe in Gideon's head that we're going to build a memorial to this great victory over the Midianites, but it's an ephod, and an ephod can be interpreted in several different ways. But for the most part, that was the holy, sacred garment that the high priest would wear. And so for me, it helps me to think of, like, when a suit of armor, or, they'll be doing archaeological digs in China, and, they show these great Chinese emperor outfits, or maybe a shogun warrior in Japanese, these great outfits. But this was a huge made of gold outfit, or it could have been a statue of that. But if it was the actual outfit, then maybe the intimation is that Gideon was wearing it and doing priestly duties, which would not have been a great thing. That would have been a huge sin in his life. But it's also a sin just to make the statue, because it turns into an idol, right? It's, and we're talking about Exodus 20, the 10 Commandments, where it says don't make anything, and he's making this. And it's obviously a beautiful thing. Remember when Moses is leading the children of Israel in the desert, and poisonous snakes start biting them. God says, make a bronze snake, put it on a pole, hold it up, and the people will be healed. And so they are. It's a great miracle. It's an incredible answer from God for this. And it says that from that point on, it was called Nehushtan, that they would bow down and worship it. And the people would worship the snake on the stick, not God who gave them the snake on the stick, just to stare at. They had missed the point there. Because again, we are vision-oriented people, tangible people. You remember in the golden calf, we want a God we can see. And And so that is the definition of anti-faith, right? It's not faith believing in the unseen, what we haven't seen. All right, so they're prostituting themselves is what it says by worshiping it. And that idea, we would go, oh, that's another, they're using that word, not necessarily like a real prostitute, but in all actuality, in the promised land, there are, some of these tribes and groups of people, these countries did things as part of their worship that were very sexualized, sensualized kind of things in terms of sex was part of their worshiping of their gods. In fact, you'll hear if you go back and read the books of 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, you will find that at God's temple they had male shrine prostitutes, and those are legitimate. Not legitimate; they're actual prostitutes, and so that would be part of the worship ceremony for whoever. And so it's just crazy perversion. And so that actually could really mean prostituting themselves in that sense, but more likely just that they are, unfaithful to God is kind of the point it's making. It says, if we go to 28, thus Midian was subdued before the Israelites and did not raise its head again. During Gideon's lifetime, the land had peace 40 years. All right, so that's the benefit. That is that giant blessing. And I want you to hear that because when good defeats evil, there is peace. And we talk about, the 1950s being this great time of business and family and all of these blessings from after World War II. And that is because good defeated evil. And there's no doubt in that at all. That's not the victors write the history book. That's not what I'm talking about there. Because I think we can all look at Hitler and we can look at the Japanese in terms of what they were doing and what they were planning and knowing that that was true evil that was trying to rule the world. And to get to this point, there has to be someone or some group that stands up on behalf of good. It's not that God is not concerned. It's not that God doesn't intervene himself, but that he raises up people to take a stand in the midst of this and to bring about change. And it's not that he needs us to do that. It is a way of people's faith being grown and the body of Christ to grow in numbers by seeing these things happen. So here he is, 40 years of peace is the blessing after the fact, but it took Gideon standing up for that to happen. It took Gideon stepping out in faith for that to be possible. God used him, did great things, and the land had peace because evil was defeated. When times are good and things change, then, in that way for good, there is the opportunity for things to get off track. And it's because we get lazy or we get less disciplined. Remember, we talked for the last couple of weeks about when we get out of control. We lose our discipline and we get out of control. We abuse things. Whether it's I let one drink a day, alcohol drink a day turn into many drinks per day, and I get out of control and go from just enjoying a beer or whatever, a glass of wine turns into me at Betty Ford, at a rehab somewhere, is that I've gotten out of control. I've let it become something more than what it was made to be. And there's a risk in all of that, right? I have matches in my house, lighters in my house, and I control those lighters. I don't let them get out of control or else my house would burn down. So if I have a fire in a fireplace, I control it because I can't let it get out of control. If I'm camping, I don't let the fire get outside the ring of rocks or whatever I built, because then it becomes a forest fire. And we've seen that with the fires in Gatlinburg and lots of other times, right? So here he is. The land has peace, but during that time, what does he do? And if we keep reading, it says in verse 29, Jerubbaal, that is son of Joash, went back home. That's Gideon, right? That's one of his names. He had 70 sons of his own, for he had many wives. That's what he's doing in his free time, right? Time is good. It's time of peace. He's the top guy in the area. He's fame, fortune, defeated the enemy, led the troops, and now he's got 70 wives. And it says his concubine who lived in Shechem also bore him a son. So he's got at least one concubine. That's a slave girl that he only keeps on hand to have sex with. Remember, and that's not approved by God in any way, shape, or form. But it was customary in all of these countries that if you were a wealthy person, if you were a man of status, if you were a king, you had concubines. It showed power. It showed your virulence. It showed that, not virulence, that's not the right word. It shows your potency, your power, and that you were this prolific. And so he had 70 sons. Then he had this concubine, and she has a son, and his name is Abimelech. Verse 32, Gideon, son of Joash, died at a good old age and was buried in the tomb of his father Joash in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. So during this free time, he's got wives, all these wives. He's got at least 70 sons, more, maybe probably daughters, because they wouldn't list them culturally, society-wise, only the males. And we go, what a foreign thing that is, right? Oh, except in China that they only keep the boys, they get rid of the girls, right? That goes on today. So this is not a foreign thing to us. It's foreign from our country's perspective, but it's not a foreign thing in that sense. So, and so we can kind of get the glimpse of this, blended family, right? If you're looking for that and you're, if you're from divorces and you've remarried kind of deal, the idea of raising children that are, yours, mine, and ours kind of deal, you're going to see one of the issues that comes up in terms of competition for resources and kind of sibling rivalry and all of that. Verse 33, so this is kind of, we've talked about most everything about Gideon and what he was doing, and then his time ends. Now what's going to happen after he dies? And so you pick up and it says, this is the next verse, just in 33, so 8:33. No sooner had Gideon died than the Israelites again prostituted themselves to the Baals. They set up Baal Berith as their god and did not remember the Lord their God, who had rescued them from the hands of all their enemies on every side. They also failed to show any loyalty to the family of Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, in spite of all the good things he had done for them. So one of the things that you see going on there is this is, what have you done for me lately? 40 years of peace brings about, we have philosophers, right? You have people like me who've been to seminary, and I had professors that sit around all day, and what do? Think. When you have peace, there's time to think. And we sit around and we think and we contemplate, right? We're not, when times are good, I'm not out working the back 40. I'm not over here doing the cattle and the goats and the sheep and all that. Times are good. And when times are good, we're celebrating, and we're right that we have opportunities, we have choices. And so what you find is, so after 9/11 happened, right? After the Twin Towers came down, you had our whole government, senators, House of Representatives, presidents, judges, everybody standing on the Capitol steps singing, "God bless America," begging for God's help in the midst of crisis. And then when there's peace, what do? Then it doesn't behoove them. It doesn't win them votes. And so I'm contemplating, I'm thinking, I'm doing all of these things. And in those moments is when Satan creeps in and finds a foothold. And in this sense is they went to another god. And whether that's out of pressure from the countries that, Joshua and his guys, they sent all the 11 tribes, because remember the priests were one tribe, that was Levites, the tribe of Levi. And so the other 11 were supposed to go to their assigned, allotted territories and drive out all of the Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites, blah, 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 all those different names. And so to drive those people out. And some did, some didn't. And so Joshua says to them, if you don't drive them out, they're going to be like thorns on your back kind of thing. They're going to be, something that is in your side that causes you trouble and struggle. And so that is, they were immersed in these other cultures, and they said, remember we talked about worshiping God meant this. Worshiping their gods meant a big party. You could drink all you wanted to, eat all you wanted to, sleep with all these people as part of your worship. And so they go, man, look at all the outfits, and look at all the decorations, and look at the wine is flowing liberally, and And they go, I think I want to join those guys in their worship as opposed to God, worshiping God, because it means this and means denying yourself and following Christ. So we pick up in 9 and you find Abimelech. And so now Gideon has died and you have these 70 sons that are there. And it says Abimelech, son of Jerubbaal, that's Gideon, went to his mother's brothers, that's his uncles. Abimelech went to his uncles in Shechem. Shechem is a city, and said to them and to all his mother's clan, ask all the citizens of Shechem, which is better for you, to have all 70 of Jerubbaal's sons rule over you, or just one man? Remember, I am your flesh and blood. When the brothers, remember this is the blended family thing that I said, right? Okay. So it says, when the brothers repeated all this to the citizens of Shechem, they were inclined to follow Abimelech, for they said, he's related to us. Okay. So we know this. We can, this is what divides us more than anything else is we can say, oh, I'm from the north. Well, I'm from the south, right? We divide ourselves that way. Or I'm a man, I'm a woman. But that divides us. You know, men versus women divide. You got, oh, well, I'm a Tennessee fan. Oh, I'm an Alabama fan or a Florida fan or whatever. And that divides us. I'm rich, I'm poor. That divides us, right? There's all of these ways. And this is family. Family divides us. So this is, I'm a part of this family. And so I'm from Shechem. It's my hometown. And so it said he's related to us. Verse 4, they gave him 70 shekels of silver from the temple of Baal-berith. Remember, that was what they said they'd made their God after Gideon was gone. They'd forgotten God. They forgot Gideon. They forgot, right? All that's in the past. What have you done for me lately? Let's have this guy be our God, right? I mean, we've got new Muslim mayor in New York City. That's a different religion completely. And so it's interesting to see what he's going to bring into our country, because in the places where Muslims have come in, they want to establish Sharia law. They come in great numbers. They vote themselves into power. They eliminate all of the other competitors, opponents, and then out of fear and threats, they install what they believe. And so here he is, and that is what's going on here. And so they have this temple to Baal-berith. They gave him 20 shekels of silver from the temple, and Abimelech used it to hire reckless scoundrels who became his followers. He went to his father's home in Ophrah, and on one stone murdered his 70 brothers, the sons of Gideon, Jerubbaal, right? It says, but Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, escaped by hiding. Then all the citizens of Shechem and Beth Millo gathered beside the great tree at the pillar in Shechem to crown Abimelech king. Okay, so if we're trying to examine, remember we talked about the idea of you reap what you sow. It's going to, what goes around comes around. It's going to happen. And for us, it's that timing that messes with us, right? How quickly is that going to happen? Does God care? If God really cared, he would answer in an hour. If God doesn't care, it'll take 3 years, 5 years, 10 years for this to happen, right? And in all reality, God is making a point. And sometimes, and this is the part that I hope that you can catch here, I do believe that this is absolutely true, and I can prove it through Scripture, Old Testament and New, is that sometimes God is waiting for us to step in and to stand up to evil again, right? He is wanting us to be his hands and feet in the world, right? And so that requires us to step up into the face of evil and overcome the fear, the great fear that is within us, and take a risk and speak out. Thus, the Charlie Kirks of the world stand up in the face of evil, have conversations and discussions, and maybe we're going to have to take up arms against somebody, right? We got drug into World War II, did not want to be a part of World War II. And then with Pearl Harbor, you had, okay, we've been attacked. We have the right to defend ourselves. We got into war, right? We got into the war. And so here he is, and he has done something really wrong here. He's killed off these 70. And so, you know, you look at his acts, all of his acts, Abimelech's acts, and you find, okay, it's all evil. Everything that he's done so far to put himself into power is evil. And so then there's going to be a reckoning at some point. You know it's coming. It's just the when that we don't know. And we don't know the how it's going to happen. And so God is orchestrating and setting this up, because now what did the people of Shechem do? the people of Shechem gave the money. And let's take a little bit of a second to realize what's the state of their society. 70 shekels of silver is 1 3/4 pounds. That's all it took to hire reckless scoundrels who then went and helped him murder 70 people. So 70 shekels of silver for 70 people, right? Even though he only kills 69 of them. That's kind of the way that I read that. But it's like a shekel per person is all it took to murder somebody. Right? Remember, he took up 1,700, Gideon did, to make the ephod. 1,700, 43 pounds worth of gold, right? 1,700 shekels. This is only 70 shekels to hire the people to go and kill all the sons of Gideon. So they all were killed for a shekel apiece. Nothing. So the state of their society, they didn't have much, they didn't honor human life very much, is what I'm saying. So here they are. And then, so Jotham, now let's examine what he does, because if you're looking for the timing, if you're looking for, hey, I want something to happen to Abimelech immediately. So one son escapes and you're thinking, okay, he's going to raise up. He's the youngest son. We don't know how old he is, right? He's the one that has been wronged, I guess, besides the mothers of these, right, of these kids. But this brother, he's lost 69 brothers on the spot. He has a right and ownership, and he's not the king. Gideon's already said, hey, we're not going to rule over you. God is going to rule over you. And so he is actually, what does he have a right to? You know what I'm saying? Jotham. It's not that he has a right to be king, but he is Gideon's son. That's what he is. And so Abimelech is a half brother of his. He's killed everybody else. And so maybe at this point, what if Jotham stands up in the face of evil and does something? Well, that's almost right away, right? Timing wise, this just happened. He has the right to stand up on behalf of his 69 brothers that were just killed, gather up people, gather up an army. We know that Gideon was wealthy, so we're assuming that Jotham had money as well that was inherited from his father. But that's also a question, because if Gideon's living large after the victory in his final years, he could have spent every dime and bounced the last check, right? We don't know that. So, but Jotham has the opportunity, trusting in God, that you reap what you sow. But this is what happens. He makes a prophecy against Abimelech, a prophecy against the Shechemites. And then look at verse 21, because he says, you're going to reap what you sow. That's what he's prophesying about both of them. He's telling them, this is what God is going to do. Doesn't know the when, doesn't know the how, but this is what God is going to do. And then this is the verse, 9:21. Then Jotham fled, escaping to Beer, and he lived there because he was afraid of his brother Abimelech. So he didn't do anything. He was scared, didn't trust God enough to do anything, to stand in the face of evil. And so the next line in 22 says, after Abimelech had governed Israel 3 years, God stirred up animosity between Abimelech and the citizens of Shechem so that they acted treacherously against Abimelech. For us, we go, goodness gracious, 3 years has passed now, 1,000 or more days that has passed, and God has not done anything. And we go, where are you in the midst of this, God? Right? That's the question that lots of folks will ask. How the timing? Why these? Who's going to get justice for these 69 sons of Gideon that were killed? And so we look at this and we go, well, Jotham could have gotten justice if he had just listened to what God said and went and done, right? I mean, if he had trusted God, stepped out in faith, went and confronted his half brother. Not saying it would have happened, but could have, right? It's always, what are we willing to do and let God work through us, right? When we get involved in, maybe it's in your neighborhood, we get involved because there's something going on injustice wise, or in our communities, our cities, our state, our nation, right? In the world, because right now, because those are little things, but when I say that over 100,000 Christians in Nigeria have been murdered by Muslims in the last year, what have you done? What have I done? A lot of us go, we didn't even know. And yet that's going on in Africa, in Nigeria, and have we done anything? I mean, Bill Maher is the one who reported it as far as, and he's Democrat. He's supposed to be way on the other side, but yet he's not even a Christian. And he would say, Christians are getting murdered by the hundreds of thousands in Africa, and the world is just going, sounds kind of dangerous to me. I'm not going over there. They're murdering everybody that's Christian. And we're not letting God use us to bring change, to bring hope to those people, to stop the bloodshed. We're not doing any of those things, much like what Jotham did. All right, so we looked at him, and then 3 years pass, and there's a couple of things that happen. And if we're looking we just picked up right there in 22, and it said, notice in 24, he says, God did this in order that the crime against Jerubbaal, 70 sons, Gideon's 70 sons, the shedding of their blood might be avenged on their brother Abimelech and on the citizens of Shechem who had helped him murder his brothers. In opposition to him, these citizens of Shechem set men on the hilltops to ambush and rob everyone who passed by, and this was reported to Abimelech. All right, there's two different things, and we'll end right here. Two different things that happen. A guy named Gaal comes in, and you can say Gael if you want to say it, but he comes in and he says, I don't like Abimelech. I don't like what he's doing, and he's not really one of us. He's a half-breed. His dad is Gideon, and his mom was from here. And so, again, dividing us between, family. Because remember they said, we're doing it because he's family. Well, he's not really family now. We've split the hair, right? The gnat hair. And we said, no. He's not really from Shechem. He's only half from Shechem. And so now we don't like him because we don't like what he's been doing to us for 3 years and lording over us and taking taxes and blah, 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 whatever else. And he did evil by killing, Gideon's 70 sons. And so now this Gaal guy comes and he's trying to raise up an army, and he's trying to step into the middle of this. And I want you to hear this, because then you're going to say, that failed. It did. Gaal was killed and the uprising is put down by Abimelech. And we would go, it was a perfect opportunity. Why didn't God do that? Who is Abimelech worshiping? Who are the descendants of, all the people that were, we already said, it was a snare. The ephod was a snare, and that they were worshiping Baal Berith. The people of Israel were. And that, they said when Abimelech needed money, they got 70 shekels from the temple of Baal Berith. And then, so the people of Shechem are worshiping Baal Berith. They're not worshiping God. And so God is nowhere to be found in any of this. Nobody is worshiping God in this story. And so all the evil people are now fighting with one another, and they're getting what is going to, they're reaping what they sowed. So Abimelech is ruling over people now who hate his guts, and he's having a fight with his own people now, and people are being killed, and Gaal is killed. And then the next one is that comes up is that when he starts fighting, it's the people of Shechem, and he defeats Abimelech, defeats them and drives them to a tower, a stronghold, and he builds a fire around it and kills everybody in this stronghold, everybody in this tower, 1,000 people, men and women in Shechem. So now he's killing off the people of Shechem, the people who had given him the 70 shekels, the people who had helped him to be able to kill the sons of Gideon. He keeps going, because we all know that bloodthirstiness, once it gets moving, once the murder starts happening, is that he's going to try and defeat all of his enemies at this point. So he goes to Thebez, or Thebes, however you want to say it, but it's got a Z at the end of it, right? And so he goes there, and they go in their stronghold, and he's like, work the last time. Everybody grab some branches and get some firewood, and we're going to go and we're going to smoke them out, burn them out, kill them, whatever we do. And as the leader, this prideful, confident leader, it's worked before, I'm killing off my enemies, he lays down his wood, gets ready to start the fire. Everybody's doing that, all of his men, and a woman in the tower up high drops an upper millstone on his head, cracks his skull, falls to the ground, and he's begging his armor bearer. This is Abimelech, begging his armor bearer. This is what he's saying to him. Kill me so that I won't die from a woman dropping a rock on my head, and have people, that will be my legacy. That was how I was killed. So the armor bearer, his servant, kills him, sticks it in him, kills him. And so we have all of that to say at the end, when we get down to the end of the story, it says in 950, 950, I guess it's 56. Thus God repaid the wickedness that Abimelech had done to his father by murdering his 70 brothers. God also made the people of Shechem pay for all of their wickedness. the curse of Jotham, son of Jerubbaal, came on all of them. The prophecy that he had done to both of them. And so we read this, and it's chapter 8 and 9, and it's done. But years had passed in between at the time, right? Over 3 years. And so some of us read that and we go, God's not concerned when I'm wronged. Well, sometimes we're wronged for our own sin, right? We do something to somebody, they come back, punch us in the nose, and we go, you saw it, God, you saw him punch me in the nose. And God goes, remember the 14 things you did to cause that? And we go, don't talk to me about my own sin. He's got more sin than I do, right? And that's what, in this story, we lose sight. As we're reading this, is where we lose the glimpse of perspective to say, they're all worshiping Baal-Berith. Every single one of the people in this story are worshiping Baal-Berith, and we're concerned with why this is not being, when in reality we know John 10:10 tells us that the thief comes only to what? Steal, kill, and destroy. Anytime that you're worshiping a foreign god, anytime you're worshiping a non-entity god, things that are made out of silver, gold, wood, stone, all of this kind of stuff, just made up gods that we can worship because we can see them, then we know that we're worshiping demons that come only to steal, kill, and destroy in our personal lives, in our families, in our communities, societies, states, nations, and world. And we can look around us and we can see it all over the place, right? We can see it absolutely. If I said, hey, we're going to go to Haiti. If I said that to you on a mission trip, many of you would go, I'm not going to Haiti. They got voodoo in Haiti. They got a lot of spooky, it's voodoo. Some people say that when you talk about going to New Orleans or whatever. No, I'm not going down there. They do voodoo or whatever. But especially with Haiti, they talk about that. And when you go down and you see how their society works, they sell their children to one another and to come outside of Haiti mostly. They sell their children to be used as sex slaves. Reykjavik. No, not Reykjavik. Sorry. They are, I'll come up with the word here in a minute. I'm so sorry. But they actually sell their children to make money because they're so poor that helps their family. And so then you go, why do I have so much, pain, suffering, and devastation? Well, it's because of the same reason that we do here. When you're worshiping the devil, when you're worshiping demons, when you're worshiping false gods, that's what it brings into your life. And I want you to be able to see that because God makes sure you reap what you sow, right? He makes sure that in this story, everybody, there's consequences for our sin. The wages of that sin is death, Romans 6:23. So we'll stop right there. Sorry, we went a little long tonight, but I hope you have a great rest of the week. God bless you, and we'll talk to you soon. See you Sunday.